Get out of the car, old man. Go figure yourself out. My son's words hit me like a sledgehammer to the heart as he sped away, abandoning me in the mountain rain. I thought my life was over. But then suddenly a sleek black luxury car pulled up, and a wealthy blind elderly woman stepped out and whispered, "Pretend to be my grandson, and your son will regret abandoning you." I had no idea she would change my entire life. But before I tell you how this mysterious woman proved to be my salvation, drop a comment with your city and current time. I'm curious how far this story has traveled tonight. We were driving back from dinner at Asheville's most expensive restaurant, the kind of place Andrew insisted on taking us to show off his success. I sat in the back of his BMW while my son gripped the steering wheel, and his wife Chelsea stared out the passenger window, both of them radiating the kind of cold anger that had been building all evening. The dinner had been a setup. I should have known when Andrew suggested we talk about the future over prime rib and wine that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. "Dad, we need to discuss something important," Andrew said, his voice cutting through the silence as we wound through the dark mountain roads. "Chelsea and I have been looking at a new car. Here it comes, I thought. It's a BMW X5, perfect for Chelsea's real estate business. The thing is, we need $50,000 to make it happen. $50,000, just like that, as if it was pocket change. Son, you need to live within your means," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You both have good jobs. Maybe save up for a few months or look at something more affordable." Chelsea whipped around in her seat, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the dashboard lights. "Your father is being selfish, Andrew. He's hoarding all that money while we're trying to build our future." Hoarding. I felt heat rise in my chest. "I worked 2 jobs for 15 years after your mother died to put Andrew through college. That money represents every sacrifice I made. Don't bring Catherine into this." Andrew snapped his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "She's not here to see what you've become. A bitter old man who won't help his own family." The words hit like a slap. Catherine had been gone 8 years now, and I'd spent every one of them making sure our son had everything he needed. College tuition, wedding expenses, help with their house down payment. When had helping become hoarding? "What I've become," I said, my voice rising despite myself, "I've become a father who taught his son the value of hard work and responsibility, something Catherine would have been proud of." "Enough!" Andrew suddenly jerked the wheel and pulled onto the shoulder. Gravel sprayed as we came to a hard stop. Rain drummed against the roof. "You know what, Dad? I'm done with this conversation." "I'm done with you." The silence that followed was deafening. "Andrew, what are you—" "Get out." 2 words. Simple. Final. "What?" "You heard me. Get out of my car." His voice was deadly calm now. "If you won't help your own son, if you want to be selfish with money, you'll never spend. Then figure out your own life." Chelsea was actually smiling, watching this unfold like it was entertainment. "Son, it's pouring rain. We're miles from town. Get out." The roar filled the small space, and I realized the young man I'd raised was gone. In his place sat a stranger wearing my son's face. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle. Andrew was already outside, yanking my overnight bag from the trunk and hurling it onto the wet asphalt. The mountain air hit me like a wall of cold water. "Andrew, please," I started, but he was already back behind the wheel. The BMW's engine roared to life. Through the rain-streaked passenger window, I caught one last glimpse of Chelsea's satisfied smile before the taillights disappeared around the bend. And then there was nothing but darkness, rain, and the crushing weight of abandonment. I stood there on that empty mountain road, 61 years old, and completely alone, wondering how the son I'd sacrificed everything for could leave me like a piece of trash on the side of the road. The rain soaked through my jacket, but it was nothing compared to the ice spreading through my chest. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as I stood on that empty mountain road. My watch showed 11:30, but time seemed meaningless now. Andrew's taillights had long since disappeared, leaving only darkness and the steady drumming of rain on asphalt. 61 years old. No phone, no money, no way home. Just me and the crushing realization that my own son had thrown me away like trash. Was I really such a terrible father? I whispered to the empty night. The purr of an expensive engine interrupted my despair. Headlights appeared around the bend. A sleek black luxury sedan moving slowly, deliberately. The car pulled beside me with the quiet precision of money. The rear door opened, and a man in a black suit stepped out with an umbrella. "Sir, please get out of the rain," he said gently. Then a woman's voice drifted from inside the car, refined, authoritative, completely unexpected. "Are you all right, Dennis?" I froze. She knew my name. This complete stranger somehow knew who I was. "How do you—" I stammered, water streaming down my face. "Please," she said, and I could see her silhouette. Elderly silver hair, elegant posture. Her eyes stared straight ahead, unfocused, and I realized she was blind. "You're soaked through." Walter helped him with his bag. The suited man, Walter, collected my overnight bag with respectful efficiency. "Ma'am, I don't understand," I said, not moving. "How do you know my name?" A pause, then something like a chuckle. "I need you to do me a favor." "Dennis," she said, completely ignoring my question, "pretend to be my grandson, just for a few minutes." "What I don't—" "Your son will regret leaving you like this," she continued with odd certainty. "Trust me." As if on cue, familiar headlights appeared behind us. Andrew's BMW moving slowly, cautiously. He'd come back, maybe guilt, maybe just checking if I was dead. The BMW crept past, and I saw Andrew's face pressed against his window, eyes wide with confusion. His father standing beside a car that probably cost more than Andrew's house being attended by what looked like a private chauffeur. Through his windshield, I caught a glimpse of Chelsea's shocked expression. This wasn't part of their plan. "How do you know my name?" I asked again. The woman leaned forward, and I glimpsed her face. Composed, mysterious, with eyes that seemed to hold decades of secrets despite their blindness. "Destiny has a way of bringing people together?" "Dennis," she said, her smile enigmatic in the dim light, "now please get in before you catch pneumonia. We have so much to talk about." Walter held the umbrella higher, waiting patiently. Behind us, Andrew had pulled over and was getting out of his car, probably trying to process what he was seeing. For the first time tonight, I felt something other than despair. Curiosity. Hope, maybe. Whatever it was enough. I stepped toward the open door, leaving my son standing in the rain for once. The luxury sedan climbed winding mountain roads through the storm. Helena sat across from me in comfortable silence, her elegant hands folded over a walking cane, while Walter navigated with practiced ease. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Home," she replied simply. 20 minutes later, wrought iron gates opened to reveal a Victorian mansion rising from the mountainside like something from another century. Warm light glowed from tall windows, welcoming us through the rain. "Welcome to Fairchild Manor," Helena said as Walter helped us from the car. Despite her blindness, she moved up the front steps with complete confidence. The interior was breathtaking. Persian rugs, oil paintings, polished hardwood floors. A grandfather clock chimed midnight as Walter took my soaked jacket, replacing it with a warm robe that smelled of cedar. "You must be hungry," Helena said, leading me to an elegant dining room. Within minutes, I was sharing soup and sandwiches with this mysterious woman, Brandy, warming my chest and chasing away the mountain cold. "Tell me about yourself, Dennis," she said, her unseeing eyes somehow finding mine. "I sense you've been carrying a heavy burden. Maybe it was the brandy or the surreal evening, but I found myself opening up. My wife, Catherine, died 8 years ago. After that, it was just me and Andrew. I worked 2 jobs to put him through college, helped with his wedding, tried to be there for everything. The words came easier than expected. Tonight, he threw me away because I wouldn't give him $50,000 for his wife's car." Helena set down her teacup with a gentle clink. "Dennis, sometimes we give so much of ourselves that we forget our own worth. We become so focused on being needed that we lose sight of being valued." Her words hit deep. "I just wanted to be a good father." "You don't need permission to exist, Dennis," she said firmly. "Your worth isn't determined by how much money you hand over. A parent's job is to raise a child who can stand alone, not to bankrupt themselves proving love." After dinner, despite the late hour, Helena insisted on showing me the gardens. We walked covered pathways under soft lantern light, the air filled with roses and jasmine. "Close your eyes," she instructed at a small gazebo. "Tell me what you hear." I obeyed, gradually becoming aware of sounds I'd missed. A fountain's splash, rustling leaves, a night bird's distant call. "Life has music, Dennis, but we're often too busy to listen," she said softly. "When did you last take time to simply be present?" I couldn't remember. The past 8 years had been a blur of work and worry. For the first time in longer than I could recall, I felt something approaching peace. This elegant stranger had taken me and fed me and somehow made me feel human again. "Helena," I said as we returned to the house, "why are you doing this? Why help a complete stranger?" She paused at the porch steps, thoughtful in the lamplight. "Because I once abandoned someone I loved, thinking it was the best thing for them," she said quietly. I've spent decades wondering if I made the right choice. The weight in her words suggested a story much deeper than she was ready to share. Some secrets are worth waiting for. Dennis, she continued, placing a gentle hand on my arm, but first you must learn to value yourself again. Tomorrow we'll begin that journey. The next few days at Fairchild Manor were the most peaceful I'd experienced in years, but that tranquility was about to be shattered. I was having breakfast with Helena when Walter approached with a concerned expression. Sir, there's been some unusual activity at the front gate, he said quietly. A BMW has driven past several times this morning, slowing down each time. Helena set down her teacup. Andrew! I believe so, ma'am. My stomach tightened. I should have known he wouldn't just disappear. Through the tall windows of the dining room, I caught a glimpse of the familiar car creeping along the road outside our gates. He can see me? I realized, stepping back from the window. From that angle, he can see right into this room? Within an hour, my phone started ringing. I turned it back on the day before, thinking enough time had passed. I was wrong. Andrew's number flashed on the screen again and again. I let every call go to voicemail. Mr. Dennis, Walter said, appearing in the doorway. There's someone at the gate requesting entry. Claims to be your son. Helena and I exchanged glances. What did you tell him? That you're resting and don't wish to be disturbed. He became quite agitated, sir. Insisted he needed to apologize for what happened. I walked to the front windows and peered through the curtains. There was Andrew pacing beside his car at the gate, gesticulating wildly as he spoke into the intercom. Even from this distance I could see his desperation. He's not going away, I murmured. Over the next 2 days the attempts escalated. Flower deliveries arrived with elaborate apology cards. I watched from my bedroom window as Walter politely refused them at the gate. Then came the handwritten letters. Pages and pages of them, all returned unopened on Helena's instructions. Actions speak louder than words. She told Walter to write on a note that accompanied the returned correspondence. Please sign it, HF. I found myself both fascinated and disturbed by Andrew's persistence. This was a side of him I'd never seen. Not the entitled young man who'd thrown me out of his car, but someone genuinely panicked. Walter reported that Andrew had even tried to bribe the groundskeeper to let him onto the property. What's gotten into him? I wondered aloud to Helena as we sat in the garden. He's seen you in a position of power for the first time in his life, she replied. Suddenly his meal ticket isn't begging for his approval. That terrifies men like your son. On the third day I was reading in the library when Walter knocked urgently. Sir, I'm afraid we have a situation. Your son and his wife have somehow gotten onto the grounds. They're in the garden. My heart raced. How? They appear to have climbed the fence near the old oak tree. Shall I call the authorities? I looked at Helena, who nodded grimly. Not yet, Walter. Let me see what he wants first. As we made our way to the garden, I could hear raised voices. Through the French doors, I saw Andrew and Chelsea, standing among Helena's prized roses, both looking disheveled and desperate. Andrew's expensive clothes were torn from climbing the fence, and Chelsea's designer shoes were muddy from the garden soil. The sight of them there, trespassing in the one place where I'd found peace, filled me with a cold anger I'd never felt before. This wasn't the broken old man who'd stood in the rain 3 weeks ago. This was someone who'd learned his worth, and I wasn't about to let anyone, not even my son, take that away from me. Well, I said to Helena, straightening my shoulders, I suppose it's time to finish this once and for all. 3 days had passed since Andrew's failed attempts at the gate, and I'd grown comfortable at Fairchild Manor. Yet I sensed Helena was holding something back, weighing whether to trust me with whatever secret lay behind her kindness. That evening, rain drummed against the windows as Helena asked me to join her in her private study. On the table beside her sat an old wooden box, along with yellowed documents and photographs that looked decades old. Dennis, she said with unusual formality, I need to tell you something important. I haven't been entirely honest about why I was on that mountain road, or how I knew your name. My heart began to race as she opened the box, removing a faded photograph of a young woman, with Helena's features but eyes full of fear. This was taken in 1963. I was 20 years old, unmarried, and pregnant. Her voice was quiet, but steady. In those days, that was a scandal that could destroy a family. I had no money, no education, no way to support a child. She reached for another document, a birth certificate with my name. I carried that baby for 9 months, loving him more each day, even knowing I couldn't keep him. When he was born, when you were born, I held you for exactly 1 hour before making the hardest decision of my life. The room seemed to spin. Helena? I wrapped you in the softest blanket I could afford and drove to the nicest neighborhood in town. The Mitchell family, a kind couple who'd been trying for years to have children. I'd watched them for weeks. Her hands trembled slightly. I left you on their doorstep with a note asking them to love you and give you the life I couldn't provide. Then I drove away crying so hard I nearly crashed 3 times. You're saying I'm your biological mother, Dennis. The words hung in the air like a confession. I gave birth to you 61 years ago and have regretted giving you away every single day since. Everything suddenly made sense. Her immediate kindness, the way she seemed to know me, her perfect timing on that mountain road. The glaucoma developed from the stress and guilt of losing you, she continued. By the time I'd earned enough money to hire Detective Ray Sullivan, I was already losing my sight. He worked for me over 30 years following leads that went nowhere. You found me 2 months ago. Ray discovered you were living in Asheville, having challenges with Andrew. When he reported that your son had become hostile about money, I knew I had to act. You were following me? Watching over you. There's a difference. She smiled sadly. When Ray called that night to say Andrew had thrown you out, I was already dressed and waiting. I'd been preparing for the moment when you'd need me most. The weight of 61 years of separation seemed to fill the room. I stared at this elegant blind woman who'd taken me in and saw not just kindness, but a mother's love that had never died. The fire crackled in the silence as rain continued against the windows. All those years of wondering about my birth parents, of feeling somehow incomplete, despite the Mitchell family's love, suddenly made sense. Dennis, she said, reaching across to take my hand, can you ever forgive me for abandoning you? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Helena's words echoed, I'm your biological mother. I stared at her trembling hands and felt my world collapse. 61 years. My entire life built on a foundation I'd never questioned. Dennis, Helena's voice was afraid. Please say something. The dam burst. Say something. I shot up from my chair. You gave me away like I was nothing, like I was a problem to be solved. Helena flinched, but I couldn't stop. 61 years of wondering came pouring out. Do you know what it's like growing up knowing you were unwanted? I spent my childhood making sure I was perfect, so the Mitchells wouldn't regret taking me in. And all this time you were alive, living in a mansion. Dennis, please. You had money to hire detectives, but not to keep your own son. The words hung cruel in the air. Helena's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. You're right to hate me, she whispered. Her brokenness stopped my rage. I saw not a villain, but another victim. I was 20 years old, Dennis. 20, pregnant and terrified. My parents threw me out. The father disappeared. I worked 2 jobs just to afford a room above a diner. She reached for another photograph showing a rundown building. This was where I lived when carrying you. No heat, no air conditioning. I ate 1 meal a day to save for baby clothes. Every night, I'd promise you I'd give you a better life than I could provide. I sank back into my chair fight, draining away. The Mitchell house had everything. A nursery, toys, a swing set. I watched them for weeks, saw how desperately they wanted a child. I knew they could give you opportunities I never could. But you could have tried, I said, though anger was gone, with what I had nothing. No education, no family, no prospects. And I was losing my sight from stress. What kind of life would that have been? I thought about Andrew, how I'd worked 2 jobs after Catherine died, sacrificing everything to give him opportunities. How I'd convinced myself providing was the same as parenting. I failed with Andrew, I said quietly. 35 years trying to be perfect, and he threw me away for $50,000. Helena reached across. You didn't fail Dennis. You raised a son with every advantage. What he chose to do isn't your failure, it's his. Just like what happened to you wasn't your failure either. You were 20 and alone. You did what you thought was best. I've lived with guilt for 61 years, she whispered, wondering if you were happy, if you felt loved, if you ever thought about me. I looked at this woman, my mother, and saw someone who'd carried an impossible choice for decades. I did think about you. I used to imagine what you looked like, what your voice sounded like. And now, I walked to her chair, kneeling beside it. Now I understand family isn't just blood. It's about choice. It's about love. It's about showing up when someone needs you. I took her hands. You showed up that night. After 61 years, you were there when I needed you most. Dennis, Mom, I said, watching her face transform. Thank you for finding me when I needed you most. Helena's sob was half joy, half relief. I've waited 61 years to hear that word. We held each other in that fire-lit room, two people who'd found their way back, after a lifetime apart. Outside rain continued, but inside Fairchild Manor, a family was finally whole. Helena and I were walking the garden paths, discussing her foundation plans, when the sound of breaking branches shattered our peace. What the hell? Andrew's voice cut through the morning air as he and Chelsea crashed through the hedge-clothes torn and dirty. Andrew, how did you get in here? We climbed the fence. Chelsea panted, her designer outfit ruined. Since your friends won't let us through the gate. Andrew straightened his jacket, putting on his familiar mask of contrition. Dad, please. I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake that night. I was stressed about money. Chelsea was upset, and I'd just lost my mind. You threw me out of a car in the rain, I said calmly. That wasn't losing your mind, Andrew. That was showing your true character. But I came back. I looked for you. His desperation was obvious. I've been trying to reach you for days. I don't need your apology, Andrew. The words came out steady and sure. The old Dennis would have crumbled at his tears, but something fundamental had changed. Chelsea stepped forward, her mask slipping. We know you're living the high life now. This place is worth millions. We're family, and we deserve our share. Your share? Helena's voice was ice cold. What exactly have you contributed? Stay out of this, old lady. Andrew's facade cracked. This is between me and my father. Don't you dare speak to my mother that way. Andrew's face went blank. Your mother? What are you talking about? Your mother was Margaret Mitchell. Helena is my biological mother, I said, watching calculation replace confusion in his eyes. She gave birth to me 61 years ago. Andrew's tone suddenly turned oily. Well, that changes things. Grandmother Helena, surely you understand family helping family. Helena stepped forward, her blind eyes somehow finding his face. I've seen your true character, young man. The way you treat your father, the way you think money is owed to you for existing. Her voice carried decades of authority. You are not family. You're a stranger who shares Dennis's name? Now wait, Chelsea started. No, you wait. I found my voice strong and clear. Andrew, you're not my son anymore. A son doesn't abandon his father on a mountain road. A son doesn't come back only when he thinks there's money involved. You're just a stranger who shares my name. You can't be serious. I'm your blood, your only child. Blood doesn't make family, I replied. Love does. Respect does. Being there when someone needs you does. You've shown me none of those things. Walter, Helena called. Please call the sheriff's department. We have trespassers. This is insane, Chelsea shrieked. You're choosing some random old woman over your own son. I'm choosing the woman who was there when I needed her most, I said. The woman who took me in without asking for anything in return. Within minutes, 2 deputies appeared, buzzed through the gate by Walter. These people are trespassing, Helena said calmly. They climbed my fence and are refusing to leave. This isn't over, Andrew shouted as the deputies escorted them away. That money should be mine. I'm his son, his real son. His voice faded as they disappeared, leaving Helena and me alone in the peaceful garden. Are you all right? Helena asked softly. I took her arm, feeling lighter than I had in decades. I'm perfect. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I belong. The confrontation with Andrew had taken more out of Helena than I'd realized. Over the following days, she moved slower, her elegant composure giving way to deep weariness. The stress of defending our family against greed had clearly affected her fragile health. I'm fine, Dennis, she insisted when I expressed concern, but her hand trembled as she reached for her morning tea. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan confirmed my fears during her house call. Helena's blood pressure had spiked dangerously, and the emotional upheaval was taking its toll. But Helena seemed more interested in our time together than resting. We spent hours in her study sharing stories about her youth, her decades of wondering about me. I used to drive past playgrounds, she confessed one evening, wondering if any of those little boys might be you. I definitely got your stubborn streak, I said, making her laugh. Good. You'll need it for what comes next. That's when she told me about her plans. Jonathan Pierce, her attorney, had been preparing documents to ensure her legacy continued. I want you to establish a foundation, Dennis. For elderly people abandoned by their families like we both were, too many spend their final years alone, forgotten, discarded. The passion in her voice reminded me of the strength that had carried her through 61 years of searching. Helena's haven. I suggested, watching her face light up. Perfect. Jonathan arrived on a gray Thursday morning. Helena sat beside me as he read the will, her hand steady in mine despite her declining health. The numbers were staggering. The mansion investments, trust funds. But more than money was the responsibility she was passing to me. The foundation will be funded with $5 million initially, Jonathan explained, with ongoing support from the estate. Walter stepped forward from his position by the window. If I may, Mrs. Fairchild, I'd like to continue serving the family. Mr. Dennis will need help managing all this. Helena's smile was radiant. I was hoping you'd say that, Walter. You've been family. That night, Helena seemed more peaceful than I'd seen her since Andrew's intrusion. We sat by the fireplace, comfortable in each other's presence. I can go now, she said suddenly. Helena, I found you, Dennis. I gotta hear you call me Mom. I gotta see you choose love over obligation. My job is done. 3 days later, Walter found her in her favorite chair by the window, a gentle smile on her face, as if she'd simply decided it was time to rest. Among her personal effects, Walter found a sealed envelope with my name. Inside was a letter in her elegant handwriting. My dearest Dennis, if you're reading this, I've finally found the peace I've been searching for since 1963. Don't mourn for me, son. Celebrate the miracle that brought us together when we both needed it most. You were worth waiting 61 years for. Every sleepless night, every moment of regret was worth it to see the man you became. Not because of money or success, but because of your capacity for forgiveness and love. Take care of Walter and the foundation. Take care of yourself. You are worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Your loving mother, Helena. I folded the letter carefully, vision blurred with tears of grief and gratitude. Outside, the Blue Ridge Mountains stood eternal, and I knew Helena's love would be just as lasting. Walter appeared in the doorway, his eyes red with mourning. What would you like me to do first, Mr. Dennis? I looked around the study where I had found my family, my purpose, and myself. Let's start planning Helena's haven. We have work to do. 6 months had passed since Helena's peaceful death, and the Blue Ridge Mountains were ablaze with autumn colors as I stood outside what was now Helena's haven. The Victorian mansion had been transformed into something Helena would have been proud of, a sanctuary for elderly people who'd been forgotten by those who should have loved them most. Morning. Mr. Dennis called Frank Coleman, one of our first residents, as he tended the garden with Walter. Frank had been abandoned by his daughter after his wife's funeral. Now at 73, he'd found purpose and family among our 15 residents. The Asheville community had embraced our mission. The waiting list grew longer each week. Elderly people whose families had discarded them like inconveniences, all seeking the dignity and respect they deserved. Walter appeared at my side, no longer just an employee, but my closest friend and the brother I'd never had. Sir, there's someone at the gate. Says his name is Andrew. My stomach tightened, but not with the old fear. 6 months of purpose had given me strength I'd never possessed before. I found Andrew standing outside the wrought iron gates, looking smaller than I remembered. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his face gaunt desperation in his eyes that I recognized from my own mirror not so long ago. Hello, Andrew. Dad, his voice cracked. I heard about what you're doing here. It's really something. What do you want? Chelsea left me, took half of everything and moved in with her trainer. The business is failing. The house is in foreclosure. He swallowed hard. I don't have anyone else. For a moment I felt the old pull, the need to rescue and fix and sacrifice myself for someone who'd never appreciated it. But then I thought of Helena, of Frank, of the residents who'd found family through choice, not blood. I'm sorry you're going through that, Andrew. I truly am. Can I come in? Maybe we could figure out how to move forward as a family. I looked at this man who shared my DNA, but had never shared my values, and felt pity without obligation. Andrew, I forgive you for what you did. I forgive you because holding on to anger was poisoning me, not you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back. But I'm your son. No, you're a man who shares my last name. My family is in there. I gestured toward the mansion, taking care of each other, building something meaningful. You're welcome to visit sometime, but this isn't your home anymore. Andrew's face crumpled, but I felt no urge to comfort him. He'd made his choices just as I'd made mine. I understand. I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it. I know you are. Take care of yourself, Andrew. I watched him walk away, feeling no guilt, no regret, no desperate need to chase after him. That evening, I sat in Helena's study, my study now, thinking about the journey from that rainy mountain road where I'd stood abandoned to this place of purpose and peace. Sometimes the family you find is worth more than the family you were born with. Sometimes being thrown away is actually being set free. And sometimes when you think your life is over, it's really just beginning. I picked up my pen and began writing in my journal, documenting our residents' stories, preserving their dignity for future generations. Outside my window, the Blue Ridge Mountains stood eternal, and I knew that somewhere among those peaks, Helena was smiling. The best chapters of our lives often begin when we think the story is over. Looking back at my journey, I realized this true story isn't just about an old man abandoned on a mountain road. It's about discovering that God has a plan even in our darkest moments, even when our own children turn their backs on us. Don't make the same mistakes I did for 61 years. Don't spend your life begging for love from people who've already shown you their true colors. Don't sacrifice your dignity thinking it will buy you affection. I wasted decades believing that giving everything meant I deserved something in return. These grandpa stories we hear, they're not just entertainment. This true story taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice, respect, and showing up when it matters. Helena showed me what real love looks like, and God used her to heal wounds I didn't even know I had. Here's what I learned. You don't need anyone's permission to matter. Your worth isn't determined by how much others are willing to sacrifice for you, but by how much you're willing to value yourself. When God closes one door, even if it's slammed by your own child, He opens another. Don't wait for people to choose you. Choose yourself. Choose peace. Choose the family that chooses you back. The most powerful grandpa stories aren't about perfect families. They're about broken people finding wholeness in unexpected places. This true story proves that it's never too late to rewrite your ending, because God isn't finished with you yet. If my story resonates with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear these words. Leave a comment below telling me about your own journey of finding family where you least expected it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Every story we share might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Remember, your best chapter might be the one you haven't written yet.